biting Montana wind was the first thing Max Grayson truly registered. It bit through the thick wool of his overcoat, carrying the scent of pine and an unnerving clean emptiness. At 42, Max had seen his share of desolate landscapes, from the arid stretches of Afghanistan to the frozen peaks of the Hindu Kush. He had even spent a significant portion of his career deciphering the neurophysiology of human behavior under extreme duress. But this was different. The Thorne Gene Systems complex, tucked into a secluded valley, was a fortress against the world. Snow blanketed everything, muffling sound, enhancing the sense of isolation. The security gate was a steel behemoth, indifferent to the single black SUV that had delivered him. Once through, the paved road snaked toward a cluster of low-slung charcoal-gray buildings that absorbed the weak winter light. There were no visible patrols, no bustling staff. The quiet hum of unseen ventilation systems was the loudest sound. It was an abandoned outpost, meticulously maintained for a purpose Max could not yet grasp, rather than a cutting-edge research center. A man emerged from the largest building as the SUV crunched to a halt. John Coldridge. Max had studied his file on the flight over. Ex-military contractor, brilliant but ruthless, with a reputation for unconventional solutions. Coldridge was a lean, imposing figure in a tailored suit that was out of place in the wilderness. His eyes, the color of gunmetal, were unnervingly direct. He offered a handshake that was firm, almost crushing. "Dr. Grayson, welcome to Thorne. We've been expecting you." Coldridge's voice was a low rumble, devoid of warmth. "I'm John Coldridge, head of the Limit Program." "A pleasure, Mr. Coldridge," Max replied, noting the absence of any medical or scientific title. "My understanding is this program focuses on behavioral therapy for veterans suffering from severe post-traumatic stress disorder." Coldridge gave a curt nod. "Precisely. We're pushing the boundaries of human resilience, creating a new kind of operative, one capable of functioning optimally in solitary, extreme environments. We believe their unique predispositions, coupled with our proprietary therapy, unlock an unprecedented level of self-sufficiency." He gestured toward the main building. "Come, let's get you settled." Max followed him into a sterile, brightly lit lobby. The air here was warm, but the clinical scent of antiseptic and something metallic, ozone-like, was disquieting. The facility was pristine, devoid of human touch. Coldridge spoke in measured tones, his words carefully chosen to obscure rather than illuminate. "The Limit Program is highly classified, Dr. Grayson. You'll find our protocols unique. We value discretion above all else." "Of course," Max said, his ranger instincts already on high alert. "Proprietary methods, I assume?" "Something like that," Coldridge said, a faint, unreadable smile playing on his lips. He led Max down a series of identical corridors, past heavy, unmarked doors. The silence was unnerving. Only a handful of staff were visible, all moving with quiet, robotic efficiency. His office was sparse, functional. A large, ergonomic desk, a high-backed chair, and a bank of monitors displaying complex neuroimaging data. A single window, reinforced and triple-paned, looked out onto the endless expanse of snow. It emphasized the isolation rather than alleviating it. Max saw a small, integrated kitchenette and a cot. "You'll be staying on site, Dr. Grayson, for optimal immersion and security. All the comforts of home, as it were." Coldridge laid a thick stack of binders on the desk. "Your initial subject dossiers, all former military, all with backgrounds that fit our specific parameters. Study them. Familiarize yourself. Your insights into their behavioral patterns will be invaluable. As Coleridge left, the door hissed shut with a definitive click. Max sank into his chair, the leather cool against his back. He opened the first dossier. Names, faces, service records. Many had seen active combat in volatile zones. He felt a pang of camaraderie, a shared history of unspoken horrors. Yet beneath the professional interest, a knot of unease began to tighten in his gut. The first few days were a blur of observation. Max spent hours reviewing video feeds from secure monitoring rooms, analyzing recorded interviews, poring over psychological profiles. The subjects, 8 in total, were housed in individual, soundproofed living units. Max's role, as explained by Coleridge, was to assess their progress through the therapy, identify psychological roadblocks, and suggest behavioral interventions. But what he saw was not typical post-traumatic stress disorder. One subject, a former Army medic named Sergeant Davies, displayed explosive bursts of aggression, not triggered by typical flashbacks, but by minor environmental changes, a sudden drop in temperature, a flickering light. Another, Lieutenant Ramirez, suffered from an acute, unmotivated claustrophobia that escalated to violent panic attacks, even in wide-open spaces. Most unsettling was the pervasive chronic insomnia. Every subject showed signs of profound sleep deprivation, yet they remained intensely agitated, unable to achieve restful sleep. Max logged everything. He started a separate personal journal on a secure drive on his personal laptop detailing the anomalies. He cross-referenced the medical files, searching for physiological markers. He identified none consistent with conventional psychological disorders. He tried to broach the subject with Coleridge during a brief, perfunctory review meeting. Mr. Coleridge, I'm seeing some highly atypical reactions in subjects Alpha 7 and Beta 3. The aggression and claustrophobia combined with the extreme insomnia don't align with standard post-traumatic stress disorder presentations. Are there other treatments being administered? Perhaps experimental pharmaceuticals? Coleridge's smile vanished. His eyes hardened. Dr. Grayson, our methodology is proprietary, and as I mentioned, unique. Your role is observation and analysis of behavior, not methodology review. I trust that's clear. Max felt the unspoken warning. He nodded, accepting the rebuke. The message was louder than any words. Asking too many questions meant finding himself on the outside. He felt eyes on him, not just from the cameras in the observation rooms, but from the periphery, from the silent staff. He was being watched, assessed. He understood that any deviation from his prescribed role would be met with swift, uncompromising resistance. One afternoon, in the sterile dining hall, a room sparsely populated by the few staff, all as quiet and contained as Coleridge himself, Max saw her. A young woman, in her mid-20s, hunched over a plate of bland food. Her eyes, wide and perpetually darting, betrayed a deep nervousness. She was an observation camera operator. Max recognized her from the staff roster. April. Their eyes met across the room. A flicker of shared apprehension passed between them, a silent acknowledgement of the strangeness that permeated Thorne. She looked away quickly, almost guiltily. Days bled into a week. Then, a chilling email landed in his inbox. Subject Alpha 7, the medic, Sergeant Davies, had been excluded from the program, effective immediately. No explanation, no details of transfer or discharge, just excluded. Max remembered Davies's intense, unblinking stare during their last observation session, the raw vulnerability beneath the uncontrolled outbursts. Max tried to access Davies's updated file, but found a blank entry. It was as if Davies had never existed. The term echoed in Max's mind, too cold, too final for a simple removal. It was his first serious warning. Something truly horrific was happening here. Max Grayson felt the chill from the file cabinet, a physical manifestation of the cold dread settling in his gut. The early blood samples for all the subjects were pristine, a clean slate. But as he clicked through to the more recent analyses, a different story unfolded. Weeks into the limit program, subtle anomalies began to appear. Not consistent with any known disease or medical condition, nor typical responses to stress or even the most potent pharmaceuticals. These were mutations. Specific enzyme markers were elevated, indicating rapid cellular regeneration beyond normal healing. There were signs of atypical hormonal surges, not just adrenaline or cortisol, but something more primal, related to territoriality and aggression. He saw microscopic changes in bone density and muscle fiber samples, consistent with accelerated growth or adaptation. "This isn't therapy," Max muttered to the empty room, his voice barely a whisper. "This is engineering." A notification flashed on his screen. Incident report. Gamma sector. Max clicked it open, his jaw tightening. Subject Delta 4, during a Phase 2 behavioral assessment, engaged a surveillance operator in an unprovoked, highly aggressive encounter. Operator sustained severe lacerations to face and arm, requiring immediate medical evacuation. Subject subsequently sedated and transferred to secure holding. The report was sanitized, clinical. The report made no mention of how a single sedated veteran inflicted such injuries on a trained operative. But Max had overheard hushed conversations in the dining hall, fragmented whispers about uncontrolled aggression and beast-like strength. He imagined the scene, not a panicked, flailing man, but something with unnerving power and an instinct for violence. He went back to his own observations. He had focused on the gross behavioral abnormalities, but now he filtered his review, looking for the subtler sensory distortions. Hyperolfaction. Subjects would twitch their noses, inhale deeply, reacting to odors imperceptible to the human nose. He saw a subject flinch violently at the faint scent of antiseptic on a nurse's uniform, a preternatural sensitivity. There was the heightened pheromone aggression, not just outright attacks, but subtle, non-verbal dominance displays among subjects like dogs squaring off, an invisible tension in the air even through the glass of their units. And the insomnia, still pervasive, still driving them to exhaustion, yet fueling their agitation. Their eyes, Max noted now, had a strange luminous quality in the dim light of their observation cells. He heard the whispers too, not just from staff but from the building itself, a low hum of activity from the deeper restricted sections. Staff looking gaunt, haunted. One technician, eyes bloodshot, had mumbled something about the transformations. Max, the rational neurophysiologist, dismissed it as stress-induced psychosis, the psychological strain of working on a project with such unusual subjects. But the incidents piled up, chipping away at his scientific skepticism. The feeling of being watched intensified. Max began to notice the subtle tilt of the cameras in his own office, the occasional flicker of a red light. He had installed miniature covert cameras in the observation rooms to record specific neurophysiological responses. But now he knew those cameras recorded him too. His own office, a sanctuary, felt like another observation cell. He began his own hidden investigation. His personal laptop, encrypted and disconnected from the internal network, became his sanctuary. He started duplicating files, medical records, behavioral logs, even mundane supply requisitions. He built his own comprehensive database of anomalies. He used his old ranger training, watching patterns, identifying blind spots in the facility's camera coverage, noting shifts in security patrols. He would slip out of his office late at night, moving like a shadow through the corridors, mapping the complex, testing locked doors, searching for any vulnerability. The facility was designed to contain, but every system had a flaw. He sought them out, uncertain of what he would find, but certain he needed an exit. The atmosphere in the complex grew taut, like a wire stretched to breaking. Staff moved silently, avoiding eye contact. Max saw the fear in their eyes. The subjects, in their separate units, existed in a different reality, their howls and aggressive displays echoing through the soundproofing, a constant, low growl that permeated the entire facility. Max felt the ground shifting beneath his feet, the secure, scientific reality he knew crumbling into something terrifying and unfamiliar. The quiet hum of the ventilation now sounded like a predator's purr, constant and menacing. Max sifted through the program's operational schedule, a dense document detailing the progression of each subject through the limit program. Phase 1. Initial behavioral assessments and mild conditioning. Phase 2. Intensified sensory deprivation and psychological stressors. Phase 3. Advanced integration protocols. It was after Phase 3 that the records abruptly terminated. Subjects were not transferred, were not discharged, were not listed as having completed the program. They were simply excluded. The digital trails vanished as if they had been digitally scrubbed from existence. He tried every official channel. He sent queries to Coldridge, to the program director, to the company's administrative portal. Each inquiry met the same fate: a boilerplate response about proprietary information, or a polite but firm redirection to his designated observational duties. It was a bureaucratic wall, meticulously constructed and utterly impenetrable. Excluded was the final word. It meant silenced. Max started cross-referencing the remaining subjects with the missing ones. He looked for patterns, for commonalities that explained the disappearances. He knew irreversible physiological changes had occurred, so extreme they necessitated total containment or worse. He established a point of no return, a biological threshold. But without access to the full medical data, the post-Phase 3 analyses, he was operating in the dark. He needed something more than just behavioral observations. He needed genetic markers, cellular data, deep physiological scans. Data he knew existed, but was locked away. He saw the guard again. The tall, taciturn man with the piercing, preternatural gaze. Max had noticed him before, an unsettling stillness about him, a predatory grace even in casual movement. He was unlike the other security personnel who were burly and uniformed. This man wore a discreet dark gray jumpsuit, moved with silent, fluid motion. He often stood near restricted areas, his eyes scanning, not just for threats, but with an unnerving intensity, as if he saw more than what was immediately visible. Max knew the man was less a guard and more a guardian. He was also a specimen. He made a mental note to look him up on the staff roster, knowing he would find little. Max knew he could not do this alone. Coleridge's watchfulness had escalated. The subtle shifts in camera angles were now accompanied by unexpected check-ins from Coleridge himself, ostensibly to discuss Max's progress, but invariably ending with Coleridge's piercing gaze assessing Max's reactions. Max knew Coleridge suspected something. The pressure was building, a heavy weight pressing down on him. Max needed an ally, someone on the inside. April. She was terrified, visibly so, which meant she saw enough to be scared, but not enough to understand the full horror. That made her a risk, but also an invaluable asset. His moral compass spun wildly. He was a neurophysiologist, a scientist. His oath was to do no harm, to advance human understanding for the betterment of humanity. But what was happening here was a perversion of science, a monstrous violation of every ethical principle he held. He was a former ranger. He understood orders, chain of command. But this was beyond any command. This was an affront to life itself. The fear for his own safety was real, a cold knot in his stomach. But the image of Sergeant Davies's haunted eyes and the chilling finality of Excluded pushed him past the precipice of inaction. He had to know. He had to expose this. He started formulating a plan. Official channels were dead ends. He needed to go off book, unauthorized access. He mentally rehearsed routes identifying security vulnerabilities he had observed during his nocturnal forays. He needed April's inside knowledge, her access to the camera systems, her understanding of the network's weak points. The only way to reveal this nightmare was to plunge deeper into it. He would begin by finding a way to talk to April, to gauge her resolve, to see if her fear would transform into defiance. The next step was infiltration. And he knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that it would be his last. Max caught April in the break room, ostensibly refilling his lukewarm coffee. She flinched as he approached, her eyes darting to the overhead cameras. "April, right? Max Grayson. How are you holding up?" he asked, his voice low, casual. She gripped her mug, knuckles white. "Fine, Dr. Grayson, just long days." "They are," Max agreed. "You operate the surveillance feeds, yes? I've noticed some anomalies, dead zones, corrupted files, especially around the deeper sectors. Anything you can tell me about that?" He kept his tone neutral, observational. April's eyes widened, a flicker of raw fear in them. She glanced around furtively. I'm not authorized to discuss system protocols, Dr. Grayson." "Of course," Max said, softening his voice. "But as a fellow professional, I'm concerned about data integrity. For the subject's sake. It's hard to assess progress if the records are incomplete." He let the words hang, a gentle invitation to shared concern. He noticed her rapid, shallow breaths. She was ready to break. Over the next few days, their clandestine meetings became more frequent, more covert. Max would intercept April in quiet stairwells, or during her late-night shifts in the deserted monitoring room. He spoke in carefully veiled questions, nudging her, drawing her out. April, clearly terrified and isolated, began to crack. "The files, they're not just corrupted," she whispered one night, her voice trembling. "They were in a maintenance tunnel, the air thick with the scent of coolant and dust. They're deleted or moved, and sometimes the cameras just flicker out for a few minutes, always around the same time. Always when a subject is moved." "Moved where?" Max asked, his voice deliberately calm. "The The deep archive, April breathed, her eyes wide. Down in Sector C. That's where the excluded subjects go. I've seen some of the transfers on the logs. They're secured in containment suits, and then they never come out. Not that I've seen. She huddled against the cold concrete wall. I don't know what they're doing down there, Dr. Grayson, but it's bad. I can feel it. Max nodded. We need to see those files, April. All of them. That's where the truth is hidden. They began to plan. Max, drawing on his Ranger's tactical training, mapped out the facility's internal routes, the shift changes, the blind spots in the security grid. April, familiar with Thorne's digital architecture, identified the vulnerabilities in the network, the obscure access points, the override codes for dormant systems. They discussed contingencies, escape routes, and risks. Every detail was meticulously catalogued, every probability weighed. The stakes were clear: their lives. As the days crawled toward their planned infiltration, Max started noticing the subtle changes in his own body again. Not just the persistent restless insomnia which he had attributed to stress, but a heightened sensitivity. The fluorescent lights in the corridors were unnaturally bright, almost painful. The low hum of the ventilation system was now a distinct vibration in his inner ear. His sense of smell had sharpened to an unbearable degree. He detected the metallic tang of blood from a far-off medical lab, the faint musk of Coldridge's cologne, the acidic scent of April's fear. He tried to rationalize it: over-alertness, stress response. But he had been under intense stress before, in combat, and never experienced anything like this. And then there was the persistent low-grade gnawing in his stomach, a hunger that could not be satisfied by the bland cafeteria food. It felt primal, demanding. He felt Coldridge's eyes on him with increasing frequency. There were no direct accusations, but the subtle probes became more direct. Everything satisfactory, Dr. Grayson? You seem particularly focused these days. Coldridge would materialize silently at Max's office door, offering a brief, unreadable smile before disappearing again. Max knew Coldridge suspected something. The pressure was building, a heavy weight pressing down on him. The night of the infiltration drew closer. Every shadow held a threat, every distant sound a warning. Max and April moved through the facility like phantoms, their fear a constant icy companion. They had confirmed the plan. The archive was their only hope. And they knew, with a bone-deep certainty, this single action meant either exposure for Thorne gene systems or their own swift condemnation to join the ranks of the excluded. The clock was ticking, and with every passing hour Max felt his own body becoming less his own. The air in the abandoned Sector C was cold, metallic, thick with the scent of disuse and something else Max could not quite place: stale, animalic. Under the cloak of night, Max and April moved like shadows, their footsteps muffled by the heavy-duty soles of their boots. The corridor lights in this section were dim, flickering, casting long, dancing shadows that played tricks on the eye. April, her face pale in the faint light from her tablet, navigated them through a maze of disused labs and storage rooms. "Security camera, 5 o'clock. Motion sensor here," April whispered, pointing to a small, nearly invisible dome tucked into a corner. Max acknowledged with a silent nod, timing their movements precisely, darting from shadow to shadow, his Ranger training kicking in. He disarmed an old magnetic lock with a practiced click, the sound loud in the oppressive silence. They slipped through a heavy steel door, which led to a narrow, decaying stairwell descending into the earth. The temperature dropped further with each step. The archive was located in a reinforced sub-basement. A massive, blast-proof door, secured by a biometric scanner and a numerical keypad, stood before them. April's fingers flew across her tablet, bypassing firewalls, rerouting sensor feeds, her brow furrowed in concentration. A low beep, then the hiss of pneumatics. The heavy door swung inward with a groan, revealing a cavernous, dark room lined with servers and banks of data drives. The air here was even colder, drier, tinged with that indefinable, unsettling scent. "Okay," April whispered, her voice tight with suppressed fear. "This is it. The restricted archive. Most of it is old research, but there are dedicated arrays for the program." She pointed to a section glowing with a faint blue light. Max moved quickly to the glowing banks, April plugging her laptop into a discreet port. He scrolled through file directories, his heart pounding. Then he found it. A folder labeled Project Chimera. Phase 3, Prototype Development. Inside, a trove of video files. Max selected the oldest one, eyes narrowed in grim determination. The screen flickered to life. A man, Subject Alpha 7, Sergeant Davies, the medic, the excluded one, was visible in a high-security containment cell. He looked normal at first, distraught but human. Then the video timestamp advanced, compressing hours into minutes. And Max watched in horrifying clinical detail as Davies's body began to twist, to reform. His fingers were the first to change, not subtly, not slowly. The bones elongated, stretching, the skin taut across them, knuckles swelling, thickening, becoming less human, more like digits designed for rending. His jawline expanded, the muscles around his mouth hypertrophied, the teeth appearing too large, too sharp. His face, once Davies's, contorted, not in pain, but in a monstrous involuntary shift, pulling his features into something bestial. His body trembled, a violent full-body shudder indicating an internal thermal regulation gone wildly awry. Veins bulged under the skin of his neck and forearms, throbbing with increased blood flow like ropes beneath flesh. It was a grotesque, living sculpture, molding itself into a new, terrifying form. Max felt a cold wave of nausea wash over him. His scientific mind rebelled, tried to find a logical fault, a trick of the light, a special effect. But the camera was fixed, the details excruciatingly clear. This was not some mystical transformation. This was a horrifying, forced evolution. Engineered. The pain on Davies's face was palpable, a silent scream frozen in time, replaced by an animalistic snarl. April stood beside him, her breath hitched in her throat, her hands pressed to her mouth. Her body shook with uncontrollable tremors. "Oh my God," she whimpered, the sound raw and broken. I didn't know. I didn't know it was like this." She had seen the hints, heard the rumors, but seeing the brutal reality was an entirely different kind of terror. Max pushed past his own revulsion, his mind racing. He fast-forwarded through other files, seeing variations on the same theme, each equally horrifying. Then he found the data logs, genetic sequencing. Max's eyes scanned the jargon, experimental genetic material templates, retrieved from indigenous Himalayan gray wolf subspecies, Siberian timber wolf samples. The words coalesced into a chilling, undeniable truth. This was not a behavioral therapy program. It was a genetic engineering project. They were not creating enhanced soldiers. They were creating a new species, biologically engineered lycanthropes, werewolves. They were real, but they were manufactured, and Thorne Gene Systems was their unholy birthplace. Max and April clicked through video after video, each one a horrific confirmation of the last. The transformations were agonizingly similar. The rapid skeletal restructuring, the terrifying muscle hypertrophy, the contortion of human features into something predatory and monstrous. The scream that escaped Subject Theta 9, a former Marine sniper, as his spine elongated, was burned into Max's memory. It was not just physical. The accompanying data log showed a chilling decline in cognitive function, a steady erosion of higher thought, replaced by raw, primal instinct. The human consciousness, Max realized, was being subsumed, not transformed. He scrolled through the accompanying scientific documents, the dense jargon, a terrifying code. Accelerated somatic mutation, bio-integrated primal instinct vectors, neurosynaptic remapping for predatory response. He understood the implications. They were not just modifying genes. They were actively synthesizing and embedding the deep instinctual behaviors of a predator, forcing a symbiosis between human anatomy and an engineered bestial mind. This was not about creating a better soldier. It was about creating a better predator, a new dominant species, one capable of blending into human society until a trigger, a pheromone, a sonic frequency, or even a lunar cycle unleashed the animal within. A chill seeped into Max's bones, colder than the archive air. This was not about weaponizing humans. It was about replacing them. This was an existential threat, disguised as a scientific breakthrough. He found a summary file, protocol completion report. It was short, chillingly so. Out of the dozens of subjects listed in the program, only 2 were listed as having successfully completed the protocol, retaining core cognitive function while integrating primal behavioral sets. 2. Max clicked on the attached images. The first was a woman Max did not recognize, her face gaunt, but eyes unsettlingly intense. The second, Max felt the blood drain from his face, his breath catching in his throat. His gaze fixed on the image, cold dread turning his stomach. The face was familiar. Too familiar. It was the security guard. The silent, watchful man he had seen lurking in the corridors, whose unnervingly sharp gaze had always made Max uncomfortable. The prototype. He was not just an employee. He was a success. He had survived the transformation. He had completed it, becoming something beyond human, yet retaining his intellect. Max remembered the guard's unnerving stillness, his imperceptible movements, the way his eyes pierced through him. It was not a man with a strange energy. It was a predator, fully aware, fully in control of its new nature, quietly observing its environment. Max's perception of the entire facility, of every interaction, every subtle cue, twisted into a horrifying new light. The guards, the staff, Coleridge, they were not just overseeing an experiment. They were surrounded by its living, breathing, terrifying results. A sudden, sharp panic clawed at Max's throat. He felt April's hand on his arm, her grip desperate. "Max," she whispered, her voice choked with terror. "If Coleridge finds out we know, we're next. We're going to be excluded." The word hung in the cold air, a death sentence. They had stumbled into a nightmare far beyond anything Max could have imagined. They were not just exposing a conspiracy. They were uncovering a new evolutionary path, driven by human hubris. The consequences of their discovery were immediate and lethal. They had to act. Now. Panic was a cold, sharp blade, but Max Grayson's ranger training forced it back. "April, we need to move! Now!" His voice was low, urgent, his eyes already scanning the server racks. Everything. Copy it all. Every file. Every video. This is our only leverage. April, though visibly shaking, moved with surprising speed. Her fingers flew across her laptop's keyboard, initiating a massive data transfer from Thorne's secure servers to her encrypted drive. The progress bar crept forward agonizingly slowly, each percentage point a lifeline. The whir of the servers was the only sound in the vast, cold archive. As the data copied, Max formulated the next step. He needed to get this information out. To the public. He thought of a reporter he had encountered years ago, an investigative journalist named Miller, who had a tenacious reputation for digging into dubious private military contracts. Miller was based in Denver, miles away, but he was Max's best shot. Publicity was their only shield. With the transfer nearly complete, Max found a small, unsecured access panel in the wall. It was an old maintenance line, forgotten, but it offered a temporary, untraceable connection to the outside world. He plugged in a small satellite phone he had kept hidden in his kit. The signal bars flickered, then stabilized. He punched in Miller's number, his heart hammering against his ribs. The phone rang twice. A click. Miller. A gruff voice answered. "Mr. Miller, this is Max Grayson. I have information regarding Thorne gene systems. It's critical and it's about to blow wide open. I'm sending you encrypted files. You need to..." Static. A high-pitched whine. Then, silence. The signal bars on the satellite phone winked out. Max slammed the phone down, his jaw tight. They knew he breathed. They knew we were here. Or they knew I was going to try. The security was far more advanced, far more pervasive than he had imagined. They had not just tapped the internal lines. They had a full-spectrum counterintelligence operation. Instead of a blaring alarm, instead of armed guards storming the archive, Max's communications unit, a standard Thorne-issued device he had kept on him, chirped softly. "Dr. Grayson, Mr. Coldridge would like to see you in his office, immediately." The voice was calm, professional. No menace, just quiet command. It was not an arrest. It was a summons. Max looked at April, her face mirroring his own dread. The laptop finished its transfer, emitting a soft chime. "We have it," April whispered, clutching the device like a shield. "Good," Max said, his voice flat. He disconnected the phone, pocketed it, and grabbed the laptop. "Stay here. Hide. Don't move until I come back for you." He walked into John Coldridge's office moments later. The room was warm, tastefully decorated, a stark contrast to the sterile halls. Coldridge sat behind his polished mahogany desk, calmly sipping from a ceramic mug. He gestured to the chair opposite him. "Dr. Grayson. Coffee?" His voice was utterly devoid of surprise or anger. Max sat, placing the laptop on his lap, a defiant gesture. "No, thank you, Mr. Coldridge." Coldridge's eyes, as sharp as scalpels, fixed on Max. "You've been busy, Dr. Grayson. More curious than your job description implies. And rather adept at navigating our less public sectors." He leaned back, a faint, predatory smile playing on his lips. "You thought we were creating a weapon, didn't you? Some sort of enhanced soldier? A bioengineered combat unit?" He chuckled, a low, humorless sound. "So limited in your scope." "No, Dr. Grayson. We are creating a natural species, a new dominant predator that will occupy the ecological niche man has abandoned. Humanity, in its current form, is a dying breed. We are merely accelerating the inevitable." His fanaticism, Max realized, was terrifying in its cold logic. Coleridge gestured vaguely towards the snowy landscape beyond his window. Evolution doesn't stop. It's simply been guided, accelerated. We are not monsters, Dr. Grayson. We are pioneers. We are midwives to the future. A future where the most adaptable, the most efficient, the most capable will thrive. Then Coleridge leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with unsettling conviction. And you, Dr. Grayson, are perfectly suited for this new phase. Your intellect, your physicality, your adaptable nature. You've proven to be an exceptional subject for observation. Imagine the possibilities. Imagine being at the forefront of this new world. We'd be honored to have you stay. Not as an employee, but as one of us. A leader, perhaps, of this new evolution. Max felt a cold wave of revulsion. You want me to become one of your engineered monstrosities? The words were out before he could stop them. No, never. Coleridge merely nodded, a faint, unsettling smile playing on his lips. A predictable response, Dr. Grayson. Most resist initially. The old paradigm is difficult to abandon. He took another slow sip of his coffee. But I assure you, your choices in this matter are rather limited. He set his mug down with a soft click. You see, you've already begun the process. You've passed the first phase. You thought that aversion to cooked meat was just a quirk, perhaps a temporary dietary shift. You believed your insomnia was due to the stress of your new environment, your heightened senses a consequence of hypervigilance. Max felt a jolt, a chilling wave of understanding. His stomach churned. The hunger, the overwhelming scent of things imperceptible to others, the inability to find restful sleep. All of it. He had rationalized it, compartmentalized it, dismissed it as stress or a temporary physical reaction. But Coleridge's words twisted those rationalizations into a grotesque confirmation of his deepest fears. The injection you received upon your arrival, Coleridge continued, his voice calm, conversational. A standard medical screening, we called it. Influenza shot, perhaps. We are meticulous, Dr. Grayson. We don't take risks with our research. Anyone permitted into the inner circle, anyone with the intellect to potentially unravel our work, becomes part of the work. He looked at his wrist, tapping a precise, expensive timepiece. You have approximately 48 hours until the second transformational wave begins. The accelerated cellular regeneration will become too pronounced to ignore. The primal urges, too overwhelming to suppress. The full shift will be undeniable. 48 hours. The words struck Max like a physical blow. His own body, the very vessel of his consciousness, was a ticking bomb. The subtle symptoms he had dismissed were now terrifying harbingers of a transformation he had not chosen, a fate worse than death. Panic clawed at his throat, cold and visceral. He felt a sudden, inexplicable burning sensation beneath his skin, deep in his bones. So you see, Dr. Grayson, Coleridge concluded, his gaze unwavering, the choice is not whether you join us, but how. You can accept your new truth, adapt, and become a valuable member of the nascent species. Or you can become a problem. And Thorne Gene Systems has proven quite effective at solving problems. He gestured toward the door. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have other matters to attend to. I trust you'll consider my generous offer. Max pushed himself out of the chair, his movements stiff, robotic. He clutched the laptop like a lifeline. He had to hide the sheer terror that was threatening to consume him. Every muscle in his body screamed for him to run, to lash out, but his ranger training kicked in, demanding composure, deception. He nodded curtly, forced a neutral expression, and turned towards the door. The tall, silent security guard, the prototype, stood by the entrance, his presence a chilling reminder of Max's own impending fate. Max felt his unnerving gaze on his back as he walked out, the man's eyes boring directly into his evolving physiology. The corridors of Thorne gene systems had always felt sterile and confined. Now, they felt like the walls of a trap. He glanced back at the complex, the charcoal buildings stark against the snow. It was no longer a workplace, no longer a scientific endeavor. It was a factory of monsters, and he, Max Grayson, was now one of its raw materials, marked for a horrifying, irreversible transformation. He had to escape before he became one of them. Max moved with a desperate urgency, his instincts overriding the lingering shock. He found April huddled in the dusty shadows of the archive, her face a mask of terror. "We have to go." "Now," he clipped, his voice raw. "They know, and I'm compromised. They infected me." He did not elaborate, did not have time. The laptop, their single piece of damning evidence, was tucked securely under his arm. April gasped, her eyes wide with fresh horror, but she did not question him. She simply nodded, scrambling to her feet. They were a team now, bound by a shared, horrifying secret. Their escape began, not with a bang, but with a calculated whisper. They avoided the main corridors, opting for a labyrinthine network of service tunnels and utility ducts April had mapped during her more adventurous shifts. Max led, his mind racing through the facility schematics he had memorized. He heard the hum of distant machinery, the faint tinny crackle of staff communications. Every shadow was an ambush point. Every turn presented a risk. As they moved, Max felt the changes accelerating. It was no longer a subtle shift, but a deepening, undeniable progression. His hearing sharpened to a painful degree. He distinguished the rhythmic thump of a security guard's distant footsteps from the whir of a ventilation fan. The dim emergency lighting in the tunnels was enough for him to see with perfect clarity, his night vision unnaturally acute. His muscles, though fatigued from the adrenaline, felt leaner, stronger, a strange burning sensation deep in his bones and sinews, like iron being forged. And the hunger, that deep, primal gnawing, intensified, a raw craving that made his stomach ache. He caught a faint, musky scent, animalic and alluring from the ducts above. He did not know what it was, but his body responded to it with a fierce, violent surge of primal desire. Suddenly, a blaring klaxon ripped through the silence, echoing through the tunnels. A cold, female voice blared over the intercom. "Intruder alert. Max Grayson and April Vance. Repeat, intruder alert. Secure all exits. Active pursuit protocol initiated." Max cursed under his breath. "They're on us." He heard the pursuit team's voices now, distinct and clear. The thud of their boots, the metallic clatter of their weapons. He distinguished individual voices, pinpointing their exact location within the ventilation shafts above them. It was more than just hearing. It was a spatial awareness, an intuitive understanding of their movements, as if he smelled their intent. It was terrifying, but also exhilarating. He was not just the prey. He was becoming the hunter, his senses tuned to the pursuit. "Hold up," April gasped, stumbling. Max grabbed her arm, pulling her forward. She was slowing him down, a dead weight against his accelerating body. His frustration was a tight knot in his chest, but he could not abandon her. She was his link to humanity, to the world he was fighting to save. Then, Max heard another sound, distinct from the human team. A whisper of movement, too fluid, too fast for a human. A subtle shift in the air pressure, an imperceptible scent of pine and something wild. He did not need to see him. He knew. The prototype. The guard. He was among the pursuers. He was hunting them. They burst out of an emergency exit, gasping, into the bitter embrace of the Montana night. The cold wind bit, and snow, fine as powder, had begun to fall. The dark expanse of the forest stretched before them, an endless labyrinth of bare trees and deepening drifts. Max knew they needed to reach the nearest town, a tiny dot on the map called Glacier Point, or find a signal booster to broadcast the archive data. But the forest, once a symbol of freedom, now was an extension of Thorne's deadly trap, a vast, silent wilderness where a new kind of predator hunted. And he was quickly becoming one of them. The forest was a sensory overload. Every gust of wind carried 1,000 scents: pine, wet earth, the distant tang of wood smoke, and beneath it all, the sickeningly sweet scent of his pursuers. Human sweat, gun oil, and something else. Something sharp and feral that belonged to the prototype. Max's nose, once a mundane appendage, now felt like a raw nerve, picking up details that overwhelmed him. The sounds were just as oppressive. The ceaseless rustle of wind through bare branches, the crunch of snow underfoot, the thud of his own heart, now a furious alien drumbeat in his chest. His limbs, though growing stronger, throbbed with a deep internal burning, like a fever that would not break. He felt the rapid, invisible rebuilding of his very structure. "Max, I can't." April's voice was a ragged gasp behind him. She stumbled, falling to her knees in a drift. Max yanked her up, frustration warring with a primal protective urge. She was slowing him down, a vulnerability in this relentless hunt. But her small, desperate hand clutching his was a vital anchor, pulling him back from the encroaching, terrifying instincts. The pursuit was systematic. Max heard Coldridge's calm, detached voice over the operative's communications, directing the search patterns, forming a tightening net around them. Sector Gamma 7, proceed north-northeast. Sector Delta 2, maintain southern flank. Containment is paramount. And then, the unnerving silence that followed. Max knew the prototype was moving, a silent, invisible hunter. "They're boxing us in," Max whispered, his breath clouding in the sub-zero air. He felt it, a psychic awareness of their positions. A cold map forming in his mind. He tasted the approaching danger. The snow deepened, hampering their progress. The white landscape stretching endlessly, deceptively quiet. Suddenly, a shadow detached itself from the trees ahead. It moved with impossible speed, a blur of dark gray against the snow. The prototype. He was not rushing them, not yet. He was simply there, standing motionless, a silent sentinel, blocking their path. He was tall, lean, his eyes gleaming with an unnatural intensity in the gloom. This was not a human hunting a human. This was a predator toying with its prey. "Dr. Grayson," the prototype's voice was low, devoid of emotion, yet perfectly audible over the wind. "You make this difficult and unnecessary. Your transformation is inevitable. Why resist?" Max felt a fresh wave of terror. The prototype spoke. He remembered Max. He was rational, a human mind trapped within, merged with the engineered beast. This was not a mindless monster, but something far more chilling. A conscious, intelligent predator. "We know what you are," Max snarled, gripping April's arm tighter, "and what Thorne is doing." The prototype took a step closer, His movements so fluid they defied physics. You know the what, but you do not understand the why. A species evolves, it adapts. We are the next stage. It is not a curse, Dr. Grayson. It is a gift. His eyes, strangely luminous, pierced Max's very soul. You are becoming like us. You feel it, don't you? The heightened senses, the hunger, the strength building within you. It is your true nature finally awakened. Max knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that a direct confrontation was suicide. The prototype was not just stronger, faster. He was a perfect blend of human intellect and primal efficiency. Max's ranger skills, honed against human adversaries, were not enough against something that was designed to be the apex. He needed a distraction, a plan, something, anything, to buy them time. Because with every passing minute, his own body was becoming his enemy, twisting him into the very thing he was running from. The deepening snow became a shroud, muffling the forest's sounds, thickening the air with a chilling silence. Max and April were cornered, the pursuit team's flashlights cutting through the gloom, forming a tightening ring. The prototype, a dark silhouette against the swirling white, stood at the leading edge, his unnerving stillness more menacing than any overt threat. "This is your last chance," a voice, Coldridge's, crackled over a communications unit from one of the operatives. "Surrender the data and we can discuss a less aggressive integration for Dr. Grayson." Max scoffed. "Integrate me? You mean turn me into one of your abominations?" He clutched April's arm tighter. "Run, April. When I say go, just run as fast as you can." Then the prototype moved. Not a charge, but a silent, impossibly swift glide through the snow. He was upon them in an instant. Max barely had time to react. He lashed out with a trained kick, aiming for the knee, but the prototype dodged with fluid ease, a blur of gray in the whiteout. Max's years of close-quarters combat training, honed in countless skirmishes, were suddenly archaic against this new, terrifying agility. A sharp, searing pain tore through Max's left side. He cried out, stumbling back. The prototype's hand had moved with lightning speed, his fingers now unnaturally elongated and tipped with thick, hard nails, more like claws, had raked across Max's ribs. Max saw the dark, slick sheen of blood bloom on his coat, seeping into the pristine snow. The pain was immense, raw but strangely muted. It was intense, yet somehow distant, as if his nervous system, already undergoing the transformation, was processing it through a different filter. "Go!" Max roared, shoving April violently away from him. "Run!" April screamed, a high-pitched, terrified sound, and stumbled blindly into the swirling snow. Max heard the thud of a body, a choked cry, but the blizzard consumed her silhouette instantly. He did not see her fall, did not witness her demise, but he knew with a gut-wrenching certainty that she was gone. The shock of her loss, sharp and brutal, was as painful as his wound. Max turned, snarling, driven by a primal rage. He launched himself at the prototype, a desperate suicidal attack. He swung wildly, a combination of trained strikes and an untamed fury. The prototype met his blows with effortless parries, his movements too precise, too economical. He was playing with Max, toying with him, demonstrating the terrifying chasm between their capabilities. Max felt his muscles straining, tearing, his breath ragged in his lungs. He felt a sudden, profound exhaustion, not just from the fight, but from the relentless, internal war waging within his own cells. Then, the world tilted. The prototype had landed a crushing blow to his head. Max staggered, his vision blurring. He felt himself falling, the cold snow rushing up to meet him. As he lay there, bleeding, his senses failing, the prototype stepped over him. His dark silhouette loomed against the swirling white. The prototype bent down, his voice a low, resonant hum, impossibly calm, mournful amidst the roaring wind. "You are part of us, Max Grayson," he whispered, his eyes gleaming in the near darkness, devoid of malice, filled instead with a strange, sorrowful understanding. "You just haven't accepted it yet." The words echoed in Max's fading consciousness, blending with the cold, the pain, and the overwhelming scent of his own blood on the snow. He felt a strange, detached curiosity about the prototype's words, about what acceptance truly meant. Then, the darkness consumed him, pulling him into a silent, snow-filled abyss, and his journey into the new world began. Max Grayson awoke to silence. A deep, pervasive quiet broken only by the faint creak of timber and the distant rustle of leaves. He lay on a rough, straw-filled cot, a thick, coarse blanket pulled over him. Sunlight, thin and pale, sliced through cracks in the log walls of the small, derelict cabin. The air was cold, but not biting, and smelled of dust, old wood, and something wild, deeply animalic, that did not quite register as unpleasant. He knew not where he was, nor how long he had been out. His mind felt fuzzy, disoriented, like trying to piece together a fragmented dream. He moved, and a dull ache rippled through his left side, where the prototype had raked him. He touched the spot. The wound was healed, nothing but a faint scar, impossibly neat. He pushed himself up, his muscles stiff but strangely powerful. He found an old, faded calendar tacked to a wall, the pages brittle with age. It was autumn. 3 months had passed. 3 months since the snow-choked forest, since April's scream, since the prototype's chilling whisper. No one had come looking for him. He was truly alone. He found a rusted tin basin and a murky, broken piece of mirror leaning against it. He splashed cold water on his face, the sensation strangely exhilarating. He looked into the mirror. His face stared back. The same Max Grayson. No fur, no elongated snout, no monstrous features. He looked human, but he felt different, profoundly so. He found a few dried rations in a satchel left beside the cot, placed there by whoever had brought him. Hardtack and jerky. He bit into the jerky, but his stomach rebelled. A wave of nausea, strong and immediate, forced him to spit it out. Cooked food was anathema. The very thought of it repulsed him. His senses. They were hyper-aware. The scent of pine was overwhelming, vibrant, distinct from the faint, musky odor that clung to the cabin's corners. He heard the faint scurry of mice in the walls, the drip of melting snow from the eaves. His eyes, which had needed glasses for years, now saw with an astonishing clarity, picking out every detail of the rough-hewn logs, every motes of dust dancing in the sunlight. He tested his vision in the dimmest corner of the cabin. It was perfect, luminous. A sharp, painful pang of hunger twisted his gut. It was not the familiar emptiness of a missed meal. It was a raw, undeniable craving for meat. Raw. He needed to hunt. The urge was so powerful, so primal, that it momentarily eclipsed all thought. He wanted to stalk, to chase, to kill. He remembered the prototype's words, "You are part of us." You just haven't accepted it yet. The prototype had not killed him. He had saved him, left him here in this remote cabin to complete the transformation, to accept his new state. Max felt a horrifying mixture of revulsion and a strange, wild exhilaration. His human mind, the analytical neurophysiologist, struggled against the tide of new instincts, the predatory urges that now coursed through his veins. But the instincts were winning. They were stronger, more compelling, a truth that resonated deep within his very bones. He was no longer just Max Grayson. The man who arrived at Thorne Gene Systems was gone, shed like an old skin. What remained was something else, something forged in Coldridge's monstrous laboratory, refined by pain and isolation. He looked at his hands, still human in appearance, yet feeling capable of immense power. He heard the faint, mournful howl of a wolf pack miles away through the forest, a sound that resonated with a strange sense of belonging. Max walked to the cabin door, pulled it open, and stepped out into the crisp autumn air. The vast, silent forest stretched before him, an endless sea of trees, mountains rising in the distance. It was no longer a trap. It was his home. He had become a part of the new species Coldridge had envisioned, the apex predator for a new ecology. The werewolves existed. They had been created. And Max Grayson, now changed, fully transformed in every way that mattered, was one of them. He was still human in form, but the line between man and beast had blurred irrevocably. Staring into the wilderness, Max understood that the very definition of human had shifted, an irrevocable boundary now blurred within himself.